All right, class. I've tried a couple of times to record chapter 2 and try to get my thoughts on the chapter about demons and monsters and evil. It's been a little difficult because it's been a hectic week, but that's okay. But I wanted to give you a little shout out because this is a strange chapter in which serial killers go all the way back to our history of mankind and humankind, and we see a lot of historical relevance and things that connect to today from history. It says right here, and I know y'all can read, but there's some different points. I'm going to look at the PowerPoint. I'm going to look at the textbook. I'm going to look at and tell you some notes, and then we're going to scope out a couple of websites. Each week from now on, I would like to have a focus on certain serial killers that made the big time on the list because of what they'd done and the tragedies that they did, the people they killed. And what I want to try to find out is kind of see if there's a running theme between them all. So let's get started. Talking about this with the chapter 2, some of it is very, very creepy, and I know that. So take it with a grain of salt. Get your information. And if things excite you, go for it. If things trip you out a little bit, back off and focus on other areas. But it's something that you need to be aware of. Even in San Angelo, Texas, there are people who practice different religions, different beliefs. There have been calls of service where there's witches. There is good witches, bad witches, and I don't know all the rest. They got the Wiccan people, we have the Buddhist, we have all different types of religions and beliefs. So you need to be aware of these things because you don't want to close a door on any possibility of being able to shine light on the reasons why or evidence or be able to connect to those who think different than we do. And a lot of times you're going to find out that a lot of them think similar to what we do, and so it'll help you correlate. Okay, so it says Saw films. I do not watch them. Halloween, Friday the 13th, not my cup of tea. I stay away from all that. But it says dangerous, it says reminds us that evil and dangerous beings reside in our communities. We could take this all the way back to early civilization. We know that we have explanations for mass and serial murders were often derived from the demonology or the belief that the event were controlled by external forces or spirits. The notion that life on Earth was primarily controlled by the forces of good and evil that has its origins in the belief of an existence of gods and devils. There's a direct correlation of this to the Bible. In many past cultures and some modern ones, mental illness was generally viewed as a distinction or distinct form of possession, the controlling of humans by an evil spirit. I know that, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right, but my relatives that are from the Mexican culture talk about the ojo, okay? And I'm not talking about the guy that's the comedian, even though that's really funny. But, my brothers and my relatives and my in-laws and stuff like that I have, they not only practice the ojo, but I also have, through my wife's family, the Native American, where they also have certain things that they do to heal. If you ever get a chance to listen to or be with someone from India, there's certain medicines or ways that they heal that's different than what we do here in Western medicine at times. So some of this correlates to a lot of the things that you practice or your family practices or knows about, and it's part of the history. It says that in the Bible, okay, there's references in the Bible where people were possessed, that they had the devil inside them. Okay, it says that Christ, Jesus Christ, if you believe or not believe, that's okay. But it talks about in the Bible that he cast, he did his cast them out, and they entered the bodies of swine. It's kind of interesting that they picked a swine a couple of times in the Bible. They talk about that. Where's our references? Well, the Bible's a book. No disrespect to the faith, but if you read it as a historical relevance, and look at that, Matthew and Mark, there's similar correlations there. You bring that all the way down into the modern day, we look at Son of Sam or the 44 caliber killer. He killed and hunted 13 victims over 13 months around New York. And he said it because his neighbors were possessed by dogs. The dogs were possessed, and that they actually told him to kill the neighbors. Historically, there seems to have been some confusion in distinguishing an insane person from those who were possessed. Those who were mentally ill were at times identified as being possessed. It says, at least in the Middle East, mentally ill or possessed people were at times revered as the oracles of the deity or soothsayers. In other times and places, similarly afflicted people were stoned to death, or they had holes drilled into their heads to let the demons out. And this is to let the evil spirits. Some cultures also believe that a person could be invaded by more than one spirit at a time. And that's where you have your multiple personalities. I was going to show you all a deal that my wife interviewed through her PhD program. Bennett Braun is his name. He's a doctor. He's a psychiatrist. And he actually came up with MPD, talking about multiple personality disorder. And through that, he dealt with a lot of people who were doing the satanic rituals. And after he dealt with those people and found ways to actually help them, he was involved in a long lawsuit and lost the lawsuit. And I think the company he worked for had to pay over $10.6 million to the clients that they felt like he did them wrong. So that's a different story. But he actually coined some of the phrasing and how we look at multiple personality disorder. And that's Bennett Braun, if you want to look him up. People have also believed that evil spirits can inhabit the bodies of animals, causing them to act wildly. And, this is where things come up to where people talk about transforming into a werewolf. Okay, y'all can look up some of that. This belief that people can transform into wolves can be traced back to the 600 BC, when they talk about in our history about kings and different people that they believe that this was happening. It's interesting that the leprosy and stuff like that, I always wonder if there's any correlation to that, but I have no clue. I haven't looked it up. The purpose of this human to wolf transformation was for killing of humans, particularly children, in order to eat their flesh. Very weird. And this, and here's your anthropophagy, or however you pronounce that, is the eating of human flesh. It's kind of gross, but it is part of it. And there's many different stories and throughout our history that talk about people doing that, doing the cannibalism for reasons of, being possessed or turning into werewolves and things like that. When we scroll this all the way down, I know y'all can read some of this, but there's just certain parts that I thought was very interesting. A function of early European church was to find ways to eradicate these problems attributed to witchcraft and sorcery. They believed that some of that was directly correlated to those opposite beliefs and the ways that people practice their beliefs in healing and stuff like that. So this is where you came up within our history, where you talk about the great witch hunts. And, and where they would just round people up just based on their beliefs and kill them, saying they're witches and stuff like that. The Ghoulam, this is one type of historical monster bears mentioning. In the Jewish history, the Ghoulam, I hope I said that right, was a robot, supposedly, or an artificial person. It means a clay figure, supernaturally brought to life. Ghoulams were often were given life by means of charm. Occasionally, they ran amok, can't even read, and had to be destroyed. And it's interesting when you look at some of that. This doctor explained that his client had a difficult childhood, during which his mother was incapable of showing him any affection. Both parents were absent for long periods of time, leaving him to the whims of cruel nanny, who apparently frequently forced him to have emotionally stressful situations. The doctor concluded that everybody needs love, affection, and attention. Without these, one can become emotionally, there's a different word I was thinking of, like emotionally checked out is what I was thinking, and can run the risk of developing into a Ghoulam. And so it's weird that they took what historical was there and actually fit it to something of today. And it talks about the Ghoulam syndrome. will become murderers. You know, they say that's not necessarily true, but the Ghoulam profile does appear to capture the essence of many serial killers, where something tragically happens in their life, or through their raising, or something tragically gets their mind to shift, and they become numb, and they become this other thing that comes to life. A person can orchestrate the destruction of another human being and have no remorse, no feelings of his or her or external need to defend his or her actions. And this is the whole theory of a Ghoulam, based on what historical accounts tell us about what a Ghoulam is. It fits that of a serial killer. It says, although monsters we have discussed have their origins in demonology, witchcraft, belief in the supernatural, folklore, modern monsters, of course, are no longer attributed to the transcendental sources. Okay? Even though we have corpses strewed in pieces along the highways in California, bodies left to the rot in the wooded area of Washington, all right, or under the floorboards of someone's home in Chicago, are not the victims of fictional beings. Instead, they are victims of the David Hills, the Ted Bundys, and the John Gacy's of our society. Monsters in their own right, but the monsters live within and is unleashed only when the intended victim has entered or her area of control, his or her area of control. Are the men and women who commit such atrocities today possessed by the devil? Or are they simply evil people, devils unto themselves, who make their conscious choice for evil, just as others choose good? The answer may become difficult and complicated as we explore the possible explanations for a serial murder. So that is, in a nutshell, kind of saying, what is going on here? They used to give all these excuses and all these terms and different things of explaining why or how. Now, from there, y'all can scope out the cults and different things like that. I don't know if I've marked any more down here that I was looking at the chapter earlier. Here's a little bit more. It says, men and women who commit evil acts are often perceived to possess evil characteristics. Serial killers not only do evil, but they also possess various developmental characteristics that may contribute to the evil. It says the differentiation between behavior and characteristics may depend on the type of serial killer. For example, some serial killers possess highly developed narcissistic or self-centered qualities. And here's where it starts to get interesting, because they talk about when we go back in time and we look at some of the serial killers or those who killed the mass murders, we can look at them, and based on the accounts that we have in history, we can assess them looking at how we assess people today. And we can look at the narcissism. Many of these offenders display an unrelenting will to promote their own wants and needs over someone else's, or everyone else's, actually. It says, as Peck, 1983, observes, they are men and women of obviously strong will, determined to have their own way, and there is a remarkable power in the manner in which they attempt to control others. And so that's a telltale sign when you're dealing with someone, when you're interviewing them, that has had some sort of, when you have some kind of an encounter with them, when maybe if you're talking to a killer or something like that, or someone who recently was murdered or something like that. A good case example involves an offender who believes to have murdered 12 to 20 victims during a series of robberies on the West Coast. He usually stalked and attacked dark-haired, attractive women working in stores and other places of business. After robbing his victims, he would bind them up, tape, and force them to engage in sexual acts. This entailed the victim assuming a kneeling position and being forced to perform acts on the attacker. During these encounters, he held a gun to the victim's head. Sometimes he forced the women to look him in the eyes until he climaxed, and and fired a bullet into her brain. Usually those who he executed were victims who became hysterical, cried, and begged for mercy. Those who survived had complied with his demands but remained calm, some even jokingly with their assailant. The killer sought total domination and submission over his victims before pulling the trigger. The victims' deaths symbolized the attacker's signature on a completed act of total control over another human being. And a lot of those things those characteristics you will see flow over to other people that we look at. When we look at the case of Jeffrey Dahmer, let's look at this real quick if this will work.
In ninth grade, in biology class, we had the usual dissection of fetal pigs, and I took the remains of that home and kept the skeleton of it, and I just started branching out. Dogs, cats. I suppose it could have turned into a normal hobby like taxidermy. And all I know is that I wanted to see what the insides of these animals looked like. There may have been some violence involved, some underlying subconscious feelings of violence. It was a compulsion. It became a compulsion.
What would you do with the dead animals, Jeff?
Take them back in the woods, skin them sometimes, slit them all the way open, look at the organs, feel them.
Can you describe what you were thinking?
It was just mystifying to me how the insides of the animal looked. There was a sort of general excitement for me. I don't know why. It was exciting to see. I was drinking a lot during that time, and just I don't know, looking for something to some way to find some fulfillment, some pleasure. And I acted on my fantasies, and that's where everything went wrong.
Did you ever tell yourself, I have to stop this? I must stop doing this?
Yes.
When it was going on?
After the second time, it seemed like the compulsion to do it was too strong, and I didn't even try to stop it after that. But before the second time, things had been building up gradually. Going to bookstores, going to the bars, the gay bars, bath clubs. When that wasn't enough, buying sleeping pills and using it on various guys in the bath clubs. It just escalated slowly but surely. And after the second time, which was not planned, it was out of control. It felt like it was out of control.
Were you relieved to be arrested?
Part of me was, and part of me wasn't.
Explain.
I don't know. It's like I don't believe I have a split personality, but you know the feeling where you're sort of glad about something, but on the other hand you're not. That's how it was. It was a relief not to have to keep such a gigantic secret that I had kept for so many years. And once I saw that I had no choice but to face it, I decided to face it head on and make a full confession. So I am glad that the secrets are gone. I just get angry with other people who think that they have a right to somehow try to blame my parents for what happened. That's not right at all. No one has the right to do that because they're totally innocent. They have no knowledge of it. And that angers me. There comes a point where a person has to be accountable for what he's done. Can't go around making excuses, blaming other people or other things. So I alone am the one who's responsible for what's happened. The only motive that there ever was to completely control a person that I found physically attractive, and keep them with me as long as possible, even if it meant just keeping apart with them.
So there you go. If you listen to the last part of that, of course the whole thing, but he talks about why, what drove him to do that. it makes me wonder what started. I mean, he talks about when he got the abilities to kill and how to dissect and what interesting with the insides of the animals in ninth grade or whatever grade it was. But then how and why did it move to humans? Think about those things. You know, what made the switch? There have been times that disapproval from parents or society makes someone act out where, say that, I don't remember which case it was, but they had a case where, you know, maybe it was this guy. I'll have to look it up and see. But based on him, you know, being attracted to men, but his parents might not have approved, or society where he lived did not approve. Did he go ahead and kill those men because even though he's attracted to them, he didn't want anybody else to have them? Or was it not approved of, so he killed them instead of being with them? That's something we need to look at. And, you know, those are questions that we could come up and ask. All right. So let's see what we have here. If we go on with the textbook, I believe that's all I have through there. The only thing right now we have for this week, week number 2, is a quiz. Next week, we're going to jump in and start researching and see if we could start pulling together some information about these different serial murderers. Let me make sure I got everything on here. Yep. On current topics, I have one thing on current topics. I put this link on here about South Carolina serial killer describes his 7 murders in newly released interrogation.
Carolina serial killer who killed 7 people described the murders in newly released interrogation video. 46-year-old Todd Kohlhepp pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder in May. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, authorities believe 30-year-old Kayla Brown is one of Kohlhepp's only surviving victims. Brown told police he shot her boyfriend 3 times in the chest before wrapping him in a blue tarp and putting him in the bucket of a tractor. When investigators found Brown trapped in a container on Kohlhepp's property, she told them he had several bodies dead and buried out there. 2 videos of Kohlhepp were released. The first one was taken on November 3rd, the day Brown was rescued. In it, he denied killing Brown's boyfriend or kidnapping Brown. In the second video, 2 days later, he described how he killed 7 people over 13 years, including 4 people at a motorcycle shop in 2003 because he felt disrespected as a customer, and 12 years later he killed another couple. They went missing from the area in December of 2015. In February, Brown made her first media appearance since her rescue on Dr. Phil.
All right. Well, there you go. Okay, so what you have is just a required reading. Then you want to look at the PowerPoints and click around the links that I provided. I have a little bit more information on Jeffrey Dahmer, and then that current topic is up there as well. So enjoy reading and learning about the serial killers, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.